The highly anticipated second season of Amazon's Rings of Power is upon us. Highly anticipated. That's Amazon's marketing jargon. I don't think I'd say it's highly anticipated. Maybe in the sense you're in a vehicle and anticipating a crash and you're bracing for impact. Then I could see it. Anyway, I'll be going through the first 3 episodes that the series premiered with, so there is a lot to get through. There will be spoilers and disappointment. It looks like this season picks up pretty quickly after the first season's finale, with Halbrand turning himself into Adar, who has a new actor this season. I preferred Cold Hands, but the new actor is solid. Before that unfolds though, we get a flashback that shows kind of what transpired between Sauron and Adar after Morgoth's defeat at the dawn of the Second Age. What we're shown is a Sauron who's giving a speech to a bunch of orcs trying to win their loyalty, like he's some kind of politician. Ultimately, Adar betrays Sauron and kills him, which results in an explosive blast that turns the entire region into an icebox. Then we're shown that Sauron was literally a gooey pile of shit until about 2 days before he meets Galadriel out on the sea. We already know that the Second Age ends when Sauron's defeated and Isildur takes the One Ring for himself, or at least around that time. So doesn't that imply that Sauron is pretty much non-existent for almost the entire Second Age? In the first episode of the first season, Galadriel says that after Morgoth's defeat, the orcs multiplied and spread across Middle-earth under the leadership of his most trusted servant, Sauron. After Sauron kills her brother, she spends centuries hunting him down. Clearly these are conflicting points. The stories don't jive. I mean, either he's a big pile of shit, or he's taken over for Morgoth. Or is the show saying that after he killed Galadriel's brother, he had to try and convince the orcs to stay loyal to him, and they mutinied instead? That's even worse yet. But if it's between this Sauron or that Sauron, one of them is more likely to be betrayed. And furthermore, we're shown that there's some orcs out there who aren't even interested in fighting. Yeah, one in particular even tells Adar that all he wants is a home, and then we see him with what I assume is his partner and a baby. I wish I was making this shit up. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it's written or it's said somewhere that orcs live and die for battle. Like, that's what gets them up in the morning. It's their purpose and they love it. So if that's a fact, this has to be one of the worst creative decisions I've seen recently. And I've seen The Acolyte. This is modern Hollywood trying to make everybody relatable or that we should be sympathizing with them somehow. Orcs with babies that don't want to fight. That's not the best route to take, but shit, there's a lot to get through, so let's move on. After the flashback, we get to see Elrond playing a game of keep away with the rings and Galadriel. She's chasing him on horseback, trying to grab the satchel off him that has the rings in it. And he just keeps his distance like, nah, you can't have them. Give them back. Nope. Anyway, when they get to their destination, Elrond does get Galadriel to finally tell him and the High King who Halbrand really is. Later on, with some guidance from the old elf Círdan, the elves do decide to keep and use the rings, despite Elrond's many, many warnings. After we suffer through some more complaining by Galadriel, the king agrees to send her and Elrond to Eregion to confront Sauron. When we catch up with Prince Durin and his wife Disa, we see that they are now among the common folk and having to budget for food and whatnot. But the main plot thread here so far is that some of their mountain hall has collapsed, taking away the sunlight. Disa attempts to do her weird singing magic to fix the issue, which is just as dumb now as it was in the first season. Does anybody else think there's like a weird amount of singing in this show? The Harfoots and even the elves do their fair share of singing as well. Anyway, the singing doesn't work. It didn't work for the mountain, and it didn't work for me either. Prince Durin eventually makes amends with King Durin, and they decide that maybe it's time to seek help from others, like the elves. In my least enjoyable plot thread, Nori and the stranger are trekking through the deserts of Rune, presumably looking for his staff, which appears to be calling out to him. Tragically, Poppy could not leave Nori behind and has joined up with them. We see that they're being tracked by another wizard who is definitely not Mance Rayder. The credits list him as the Dark Wizard. He's the master of those witches from the first season who mistook the stranger for Sauron. He ends up resurrecting the angry-looking one with the blonde eyebrows. So who is this wizard? I didn't recognize his sigil. It can't be Saruman, right? Or can it? I don't know, if somebody knows, say something down in the comments, please. A group of the wizard's trackers catch up with the stranger and the halflings. The stranger tries to fight them off by conjuring up a sandy tornado. But since he still can't control his power, the halflings are swept up and sent to the land of Oz, I assume, where they should feel a greater sense of belonging. Elsewhere, Isildur's horse Beric is out looking for him and does end up finding him in a cave, and he's all wrapped up in spider webs. Obviously, nothing is going to happen to Isildur. His plot armor is impenetrable. But he does have a little fight with a big-ass spider. Is this a young Shelob, or is it just a generic huge spider? Can anybody confirm that? I'm kind of curious. After finding a woman on the road who ends up joining his party after stabbing him, they're ambushed by servants of Adar, but then they're rescued by Arondir. Unfortunately, Beric is taken. The horse is having a rough go of it. Soon, we find out that Arondir's girlfriend from the first season, Bronwyn, has unceremoniously died off-screen in between seasons. Wow. And now, since she's dead, her son Theo does not want anything to do with Arondir. Later on, Theo tells Isildur that he can help him get his horse back. And during their attempt to rescue the horse, Theo and some of the others there are taken by what I assume are Ents, the slow-talking tree folk. I certainly could be mistaken, though. We'll find out soon enough. Back in Numenor, Miriel and Pharazôn are getting ready for her coronation. Unfortunately for Miriel, Pharazôn and some others, including Isildur's sister Eärien, are planning to supplant her. At the ceremony, there's some unpleasantries thrown around, and Eärien tells the crowd that Miriel has been using the Palantir for guidance. That little bit of info more or less starts a riot. But during the scuffle, one of the eagles decides to show up. So Pharazôn and his conspirators use this opportunity to kind of sway people's opinion in his favor. At this point, I think we can assume that Pharazôn will be elected the new king, and maybe we will see Miriel's visions in the Palantir come true. I can only hope. And finally, we get to Celebrimbor. Jesus, there is a lot going on in this show. So, Sauron arrives in Eregion after he convinces Adar to set him loose. The Elf Lord is hesitant to let Sauron or Hellbrand in, though, because he has told Galadriel that he would not treat with him anymore. But Sauron knows what strings to pull, and he is eventually invited in. This plot thread with Celebrimbor and Sauron is easily the best aspect of the show, in my opinion. It's becoming more clear that Sauron has everyone doing exactly what he wants, especially with the elves' refusal to destroy the rings. Elrond had a great quote with Galadriel. She says something about escaping the labyrinth, and he tells her there is no escape. It's his labyrinth. He seems to be the only one that understands that the only way to win the game is to not play it. But they are playing it. The way Sauron manipulates Celebrimbor is well done in my opinion. It's not real subtle, but it is effective. He uses the Elf Lord's pride and his obsession with his work against him. He even took a new form that looked like it quite literally blew Celebrimbor's mind. He calls himself Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. I do like the way he looks in this form with his more elvish appearance. It's much better than his form in that flashback at the very least. Sauron suggests that they consider making rings for men, but Kelly isn't quite convinced of that yet. So instead, they decide to make 7 rings for the Dwarf Lords. And unlike the rings for the elves, This time, Sauron himself puts the mithril into the fire for the final shot of the third episode. This will most assuredly have some negative side effects for the dwarves, including, but not limited to, drowsiness, headaches, irritability, diarrhea, and in rare cases, death.